Now on this video, I'm going to try to show how I polish a swing arm. I've done several of them in my own bike collection. It's a relatively labor-intensive job. You need very little in the way of special tools, but you do need a lot of energy. So it's a good idea to start with to plan any job like this in conjunction with that you're taking the bike apart, as an example, taking the back wheel off anyway, or replacing the shock or something. And in my case, what I like to do is do this kind of work in the middle of the winter when it's freezing cold, because I don't want to be in a rush to compromise the quality. It does take a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and very, very little money. Step one, of course, is to take the swing arm off the bike any way you can, or if you have a friend that can help you, it's easy. Or I try to do it when I'm doing other things where I have the back wheel off the bike already. It just makes it just a little bit easier. Now, just fast forwarding ahead, when I was finished with this job, of course it was a lot of hours, it's a labor of love, but there's no part of it you can't do with simple, basic tools, and almost everything I got from Harbor Freight. Step one for any polishing job is to get the part immaculately clean, because what's going to happen if you leave little grit and grime and little oxidation, it gets on the wheel, and all it does is scratch the heck out of everything and make the amount of time that you're going to spend at the buff and wheel just go on forever. Start right at the beginning with a clean. Simple green. I laid the part out in a big turkey pan, filled it with simple green, turn it over, walk away, go have a cup of coffee, which we may have a cup of coffee here. Okay, so once this sits for 5 or 10 minutes, you can take it out. If it's above freezing, you can hose it off. You can get off 80-90% of the grease. Then after this is done, what I have, and this is another great trick when you want to degrease a part, take a turkey pan, take some diesel fuel, ordinary diesel fuel, and don't do it inside your house, do it in the neighbor's backyard if you can, and a stiff paintbrush or an old paintbrush, it doesn't matter what. In fact, what works real good is a flux brush that costs about 15 cents in Home Depot, and just keep grinding away. Between the simple green and the kerosene, you get the part degreased. Now, the reason for degreasing it before you go to the next step, if you don't, that grease winds up working its way into corners and angles and edges, so you'd like the part to be really nice and clean before you go to the next step. And if the part has any paint on it, well, paint remover is the first choice to get it off, or you can take some fine grit sandpaper, 1500, 2000, and just sand it off. And if it's anodized, a lot of swing arms like on a GS are anodized, you've got to get the anodizing off, either with sandpaper or some other method before you can polish. But once you have that paint soft, now it's real easy. You can basically wipe it off with paper towels, but I found an even better way. And this is one of the tricks that I thought would be helpful on this video. Since we're going to polish this anyway, I get out my favorite thing in life, SOS. Now, SOS seems to have more soap than Brillo. I don't know if that's true. Probably the same company makes them, and they just charge you more. But SOS seems to work real well. Then what I do with the paint remover, while it's in the sink with running water, is just keep, I call it sanding, but SOSing away. And that'll get about, there'll only be paint maybe in corners or maybe around the wells or whatever. That step is really nice and critical because, number one, it removes all the paint remover. You can use the rubber gloves so you don't get anything. And when you have the sink, put newspaper in the bottom of the sink, otherwise these parts will just, not like my slop sink is a beauty queen or anything, but you'll get that part done. So now you have the part, and depending on what grade of aluminum is, now I haven't done a Ducati one yet, but I'm sure Ducati used good quality aluminum. The FZR one was extremely good quality. That was really some nice stuff. I mean, when aluminum polishes up nice, I always think, well, they use a little bit better stuff than Coke cans or whatever. But now you have this part, and it's not polished. And now, if you were going to paint it, well, you could paint it silver. That's what the factory did. Why did the factory paint this silver? because polishing it would have taken a lot of time. There's another thing you could do if you have access to a glass beater. You could glass beat it. That'd be beautiful. I don't have a glass beater. Sandblasting would be too rough because then you polish it out. Polishing out a sandblasted part is a lot of work. It's more work than what I like. But in this case, I found another, what I'll call a little trick, a little baby trick anyway. I took out some of my, and I have drawers of sandpaper, but I took out, I went to a part that you really wouldn't see anyway, and I took out, and I remember starting with 220 grit. Now wherever I have 220, 320, it doesn't really matter. I wound up, the 220 puts a lot of scratches, and whenever you talk about polishing, you're talking about getting rid of scratches. So the 220 takes a lot of material off. If you get all the scratches to go in one direction and then you go in a 90-degree direction, makes it a little bit easier. Not totally easy, but it's better. So from 220 to 320 to 600 to 1000. Various, each grade, go sanding scratches one way or the other. Now, but then at some point in time, you're done sanding as much as you can off. So it doesn't matter how you get the finish or the anodizing off. There's a lot of ways, but you need to go down, and it's very important to understand this. You can't polish anodizing. You can't, if you have paint still on there, you've got to get it off. The thing has to be in raw aluminum, and the SOS at this point after sanding will take out some of the sanding scratches. If you have no corrosion and no parts that are really deeply pitted and damaged, you can take a soft wire brush, any shape, put it in a drill press. The little ones get in the corners nice, in the edges, inside where you can't get out all the corrosion, since you're not going to polish inside here. The shock goes in there anyway. But when you look at these brushes, the ones that are gold are softer than the ones that are, put two of these side by side if you can see them. Let me see if you can see this. Would be nice. The one that's silver is a harder material. The one that's gold, usually it's gold down here, copper plated, it's a softer. They come in two grades, at least at Lowe's they do. Probably in a machine shop supply they have others. But these are nice. They're about $3 a piece. So for 10 bucks you can be a big spender like me. Now having a nice selection of wire brushes, especially the soft ones, or if you really you want to spend a little extra money, you can get ones that are ultra fine, but they tend to wear out kind of quick. But anyway, that will help you get all of the old oxidation off, especially in the corner. You can get in a lot of corners and edges and angles, but of course it's difficult. So I found a tool that for $9 really makes this easy. Now, the wire brushes hook onto the end of this with two set screws. Let me just show it. I know, because I can picture, this would be really helpful if you were trying to do something without taking a bike apart, like you're trying to polish a part down by the shocks or something. I don't know what. But this part, now, the first thing I learned about using this was pretty tricky. I had a rubber glove on, and I went like this to try to get in and pop. All of a sudden, it sucked the rubber glove off, sucked my hand around. But I found a way. Take an old motorcycle glove, put a little bit of grease on it, and you can, if you run it at a low speed, you won't tear the glove up. It'll just be like a bearing. Now it allows you, in this case, you can get inside here, get inside, get in areas where it's almost impossible to get by hand. For 10 bucks, that's a great tool. That's one I like to have. Now that tip with the motorcycle glove with some grease is worth its weight in gold, and that tool is extremely valuable if you're going to try to polish an exhaust system, by the way, without taking it off the bike. That really allows you to get places you never would be able to get without that tool. We get to the final step, and this, I bought this for Vince. Vince was going to do some BMW wheels. This is a pad that just gets into every corner and angle and edge, and this worked out great. The only problem is it's self-destructed after about an hour. But it did allow me to get inside and get a lot of cleaning done, and this was about 5 bucks. Now at Harbor Freight they come with the red material and the green material, and they come in various grits. Look at the number of the grit And if you buy both of them, you're even better off. You can use the one that's rough first and finish it up with the soft one. But they do have a limited life. As always, little useful polishing tools, and these all come, everything here comes from Harbor Freight. These wheels would allow you to get inside places where you can't get in. Most useful one, the felt pads for getting around the swing arm edges, down inside, maybe around the bottom. You can't even tell. But having these and using them in a drill press, and you even have these little buffers like this, that is super, super handy. So what happens, once you spend $20, $30 on this stuff, you've got it for life. It really never wears out. This I probably had for 20 years already. But it's all beside the point. At some point in time, it may be that you still have a part of this that's not real smooth and you're not real happy with it. So before polishing, this is the last step before polishing. And I gave Mark one of these little mandrels, which I hope he got to use because they're really handy. Again, these are about 14 bucks in Harbor Freight. Everything's from Harbor Freight. In fact, you get two of them. You get a little baby one, you get a big one. So you get a whole bunch of pads. The green ones are the smoothest, the red ones are the roughest. So what I always try to do is, and the brownish ones are in the middle, is start with the roughest grade and work away, work around, either with an electric drill or in a drill press, and then finish up the whole part with the blue pad. Now it sounds like, up to this point, it sounds like we've done a lot of work. Well, you know what? The truth is we have done. But all is not lost. Because when I think of how many hours it takes to do a part like this, to get it all shiny and all nice and neat and pretty. Now, all of the time we've spent right now, up to this point, we've done more than half of the job. It's all in the prep. It's like a painting job where everything's sanded and polished and cleaned. And the actual painting is almost nothing. Well, polishing this, and I wanted to do a little... This is really going to make... I know I'm going to have somebody that disagrees with this, but I'm going to say this. In my life of doing this, and I've done this for a lot of years, even when I was a partner in a machine shop, we always had all the compounds. We always had black compound, white compound, brown compound, red, which is usually the best, white, black, blue compound. Okay, the reason I'm showing this, and I have jars and jars of these things. The way you would use this is ordinary. This is a candle. Candle wax the wheel. Try, in my case, I like to use any one to do a test. In this case, white compound. And I'll go over to the wheel, run it on some spot that I probably I'm gonna buff anyway, and it'll either come out, it'll just come up beautifully, or it'll look a little on the dull side. If it's on the dull side, I try another compound. That doesn't work. I try the blue compound. Now, I know what everybody is thinking. When you buy these compounds, it always says, blue is good for steel, this is good for brass, this is good for copper, titanium. There's a compound for everything. But this part is made out of different grades of aluminum, and especially the welds for sure. So what happens is some parts polish up a lot quicker than others. And it's always good to have a different grade of compound, because basically all this is polish. It's grit. It's what's in toothpaste. It's what's in rubbing compound, and it's various grits. So by having this and being able to go back to the polishing wheel and try, oh, we'll try that. Wow, that looks great. Up, put the other, try that. Well, keep plenty of wax on the wheel. A couple of the things that really work for me real well, especially with this job. Wear a mask, that little mask, because this makes a little dust that just gets everywhere. If you have a buffing wheel, and I'll try to show this at the end, if we have a minute here, you want to have a little cover over the wheel so it isn't spitting this stuff up like when you water ski in the back. Now, to keep the dust from flying, that black dust that comes off, I use the box that the buffing wheel came in. Just cut one side off, put a little Gorilla Tape holding it down so it doesn't walk away. That seems to work. For me, it works very well. And in this shop, believe me, that tool gets used almost every day.
I've done this all with home stuff. And with a minimum amount of stuff, I'll bet everything I have here isn't worth $100. So, and I've used it for 20 years already, so you wonder how many swing arms can you polish for that money.
Now, if you live in a populated area where there's a place, you can look it up on the internet, they do metal polishing. You can bring this down, and I've suggested people that don't want to do this, it's a labor intensive. Go down, hand it to the guy, and get an estimate. And sometimes when you get that estimate, it changes your whole view of doing the part yourself. And then you're willing to commit to the little bit of time, or even if it takes a couple days, it changes your whole plan. Now, the final thing I like to do is hand polish. And any of the 4CR polishes, 8021, 8065, Blue Magic polish, and you can do it by hand, or you can do it with a buffer if it's a big flat spot. Great material. Now, I've had the Harbor Freight buffer. It's about $75, and some extra buffing wheels. I've had it many, many years. I've used it like a mule. It seems very, very durable. And it's not so powerful that real big buffing wheels can really hurt you if to throw the part across the room. But you got to learn the skill of using a buffing wheel. That's a skill for a whole nother video that I'll share on another video.
The point, when you get to this point, now you have it polished. It's back on the bike. What you're going to need to do is because it's different than chrome. If you have like a Harley where everything is all chromed up, it has a certain look. To me, it has a different look. I personally like the look of aluminum. If you put a piece of aluminum polished by a piece of chrome of the same part, the aluminum kind of looks deeper, has a different glow. I don't know. It's subjective anyway. But anyway, what you need to keep it like this is a microfiber, some of this polish, and maybe I would say this is what I would do about once a month. Now in the FZR, I polished the whole frame. What happened is, it was a long winter and I got carried away. But the point is this, if I take any of these polishes, the AutoZone polishes, to bring this back after this has been sitting out in the, out in the sun for a month, 2 months, or if you ride in a salty, rainy environment, at this point in time, once the part is polished, you're pretty much home free all. Let's really be honest about it. And every time you polish it, it's going to be easier and nicer than the time before. The fact that you see the rag get black means you're removing material. And I'm just doing that to demonstrate that if I had to do, I would guess, and what I typically do is if I'm going to polish a bike, the time I want to polish it is if I'm going to ride on Saturday, I want to do it Saturday morning, so that once it's polished, it's good for that day. It's perfect, doesn't have bird doo-doo on it or whatever, and then all your friends think it's clean all week long when it's been sitting in a dusty garage. Anyway, I want to show a couple of things that have gone into this project that I think they'll be helpful. It'll be useful information.
Now, professional polishers keep a separate wheel for each grade of compound, white, red, black. And I don't do that, but I rake the wheel, run a screwdriver across it. Again, I'm not going to get into how to buff on this video. I'm going to make a separate video in the very, very near future on how to use the wheel.
This one has a real soft wire wheel on it, which is nice but of course anything with a wire wheel is going to leave like a sandblasted finish that's sometimes difficult to polish off. It can be difficult. This grinder is about $70. If you have the coupon, you can get 20% off, which I did, of course. So maybe it really costs $55, I don't know. The wheel is waxed. It's better to use a used wheel. A new wheel takes a long time for me to break it in to get it where I'm happy with it. And what they do, of course, here's another sprayer. They give you this wheel. Look at the size of this wheel. And I was thinking, wow, if you were doing a 747, well, the problem is the wheel is so big, it's really difficult to do the parts we do. This would be good if you were doing a kitchen table or something. And this is another thing, I wanted to show this, and look, you can see how many of these pads I've used since we've been doing this job. This little guy is a thin wheel. It's a hard thin wheel.
Now what happens, every time you break through to one of these sets of stitches, it'll scare you. The string will come flying out and it goes brrrr for about 30 seconds, and then it goes right back to being a buffing wheel. But anyway, here's the other part. And I always leave this right up here. I always leave, see, this is a good thing. Where this resides, there's always going to be dust. So what I have is one of these little vacuums that I can, from time to time, just vacuum up stuff. The stuff gets on the rug. It gets on everything. It's kind of messy, in fact. But as soon as the weather warms up, I take this outside, bolt it to a table, and work outside. Just let the stuff blow into the neighbor's yard. So here's the trick. You're going to use the buffing wheel. Always put a hat on, or else you're going to have black hair. These old motorcycle gloves are great, that the parts don't overheat in your hand. Always wear safety goggles. I like ear protection because this thing is loud as a ridiculous. And a mask. And you can tell these masks, I have a bunch of them, worth using and worth keeping the area clean. Now, what it is, again, once you find a use for this, now the door is open to. An example, when I had one of the other bikes apart, I polished the clutch levers, there's 100 little parts. Anytime I have bolts off a bike, I come in, wire brush the bolts, get off all the corrosion, polish the head of the bolt, and there's always wax on that, so it keeps them from rusting too if they're steel. Now, because this polishing is going to take several hours or several days, depending how much time you do, I always try to keep focused on the fact that once it's done, you have that part polished forever. And in my case, I don't swap bikes all the time. That part will be with me forever. It's worth taking the time and energy at this point in time to do the best job possible. And I've shown this to my good friend John Poth here. This is fur. This polishing wheel, at the end of everything, if the last thing you do is polish it with this just puts a really incredible shine on everything. Really, and it comes with the little buffing pads too. And keep in mind, there's a lot of ways to buff anything: paint, aluminum, titanium. The only thing I tried to cover on this video is how I did my swing and arm, the tools I used, the methods. And again, these products, everything's available from Home Depot. And once you get started on this, you find there's a lot of other things on your motorcycle or around your house that maybe you really want to polish. Now, polishing anything, if you take into account it's a labor of love, and if you can afford to pay somebody to do it, hey, that's even better. But in my case, I do appreciate the fact when I tell somebody they see my bike, I'm always proud to say, yes, I did it. One of the side benefits of having anything polished, it's easy to clean and easy to maintain. And when you have a very smooth surface, it's polished and it's waxed, it stays that way for an awful long time when you have to ride in the rain, or if you ride on a day when it's snowy out. It's easy to clean the bike. All these little parts. Now, just as an example, here's another part. This is ready to polish. This will probably be in the next couple of days. I've marked which is the bottom, which is the back. I'll polish it, of course, but I won't spend all day. But the part I'm going to see, the top and the side I'm going to see, I'll spend an incredible amount of time. I'll get that perfect if I can. And this old muffler that really was in rough shape when we took it off the bike. The risers, all of the foot peg brackets, the discs, even the bolts that hold the discs on. So once you have this tool in your shop, all of this stuff is free. It's just time. And if you need a little boost of energy, you just have an extra cup of coffee and get back to the buffing wheel. And I find that coffee helps me get these jobs done at a very good rate of speed. Now, if you think this is going to be a project you want to really undertake, another tip that I always use is when I take, say, the back wheel off the bike or something else, and a bike is apart in pieces, if that's a good time to do some of the other work. And I usually do most of this work in the middle of the winter, where I don't care if it takes a couple extra days, especially the paint work. When I was doing this restoration, all of the paint work was involved. I had the whole bike apart. I had parts of the engine out of the frame. I had the airbox off. this was a good time to do it. And doing it this way, it's just such a big time saver. You don't think about it, but if you can do it all in one shot, it really is a time saver. And again, I did it over the course of one whole winter. This was about a 5 month, I always estimate about 500-hour restoration. And that swinging arm was a key part of it. And it's a key part, everybody that's ever seen this bike, I think one of the first things they're drawn to is the fact that that swing arm is such a nice little addition to the bike. And all of the parts that are polished on this, I think add a real nice dimension to an older bike. And thanks so much for watching.